This is the Game Changers Experience. Deep dive conversations with leading business disruptors, Olympic athletes, celebrities, entrepreneurs, and influencers from around the world. This show will teach you insights about the winning principles in mindset, productivity, marketing, branding, entrepreneurship, business strategy, and more. Hosted by Productivity Authority, business strategist, former elite athlete, author, and public speaker, Adam Strong.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Game Changers Experience with myself, Adam Strong, and welcome to another live Game Changers Experience podcast live show. One of the things I love about these type of shows is that we get to have this amazing interaction and human connection with you guys that we're streaming out on LinkedIn, through YouTube, and on Twitter as well. So if you guys are listening to us, do me a favor, use the hashtag live, use the hashtag replay. That'd be super awesome. And for you guys that are listening in as well, and if you have any questions around today's topic, which is all about resilience, by the way, then do me a favor, put any comments, ELC, post like or comment on the comment section below. And if this resonates with you, or if you feel like you've had conversations with somebody in the past that you feel that would have a huge benefit from this conversation, then do me a favor, tag them. Because one of my big missions is to really get this show out to as many countries and as many business leaders and entrepreneurs out in the world. 100,000 is our big target. We're in 52 countries, amazingly, and we do have thousands of downloads on a monthly basis, but it would be better. There's always room for improvement, right? Anyway, listen, enough from me. I've got an amazing guest here on the show. His name's called Julian Roberts. Julian is, he's what I call a chief resilience officer, right? What does that mean in layman's terms? Well, he's an executive leadership coach. He has an amazing podcast about how organizations thrive, and he's dedicated his studies and has worked with lots of different organizations, and small and big, by the way, for you guys that run a small business. His big mission is really about how to help a lot of business leaders and organizations get that edge in terms of like resilience, using a lot of psychological strategies, but he's also created an amazing framework as well. And has worked with, I was actually reading his LinkedIn profile. And he actually worked with a number of ladies who actually rode for 35 days. I'm not sure if they actually accomplished it. I didn't delve in enough deeper. I'm sure that Julian will talks a little bit more about it. But they were a group of 6. And they talked a little bit about resilience, and you can read all about it on LinkedIn, on Julian's LinkedIn profile as well. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So what are we going to be talking about today, ladies and gents? Apart from resilience, right? We're talking a little bit about the differences between mental toughness and resilience, because I think that there are some subtle differences. So we're going to have a conversation around that. We're also going to be talking a little bit about some of the mistakes, or what I call cracks. Like what are the cracks that we look for in teams when it comes to if a team isn't resilient enough? Like what are we going to do about that? And also we can get stuck in cycles, right? So cycles of despair, cycles of motivation, cycles of conflict. How can we get out of those cycles in order to create what I call a force field or a barrier, which helps cement teams in terms of their performance as well. We're also going to be talking a little bit about vulnerability. We're going to talk about communication, all of that fun stuff, all to do with teams and things like that. So listen, I'm going to enjoy today's conversation. Julian is a great expert at this, and I'm really going to enjoy our conversation. So listen, if you are listening to us live, use the hashtag live, use the hashtag replay. And again, like I said, PLC, post like or comment on the comment section below. That'd be super awesome. Anyway, enough chit chat from me. Julian, welcome to the show.
Good to see you, Adam. I'm feeling excited about this episode already myself with that introduction. And I'm being introduced as a chief resilient officer. I've never thought about that, actually. That's an interesting way. And I've already had my dopamine rush today. I do ice baths every morning. Well, that wasn't so icy this morning. It's about 7 degrees. But I find it a good way to They've got studies now that it says going in cold water for a couple of minutes will give you a 2.5 times dopamine hit for a couple of hours. So let's continue throughout the day from this as well.
You know, it's interesting. So I have a good friend of mine. You probably know him. His name's called Warren Knight, and he has this kind of regular routine of doing regular ice bath in the morning, first thing in the morning. And I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. So I'm based in Scandinavia, Julian, right? Half the time. And one of their regular routines is have a hot sauna and then drop into like an ice bath or some sort of plunge pool or something like that, right? And now there's actually a lake not far from here, right? This is one of my very first experiences of coming to Scandinavia, right? So I went to this public sauna, if you like. Okay, now everyone was naked. Everyone was butt naked, literally butt naked, men and women. It was a mixed sauna, right? And so it was kind of weird, like coming from a culture like being British, you're kind of not used to seeing that, right? But anyway, after everyone had done their 10 to 15 minute sauna, right, they'd go outside in the freezing cold, -5, -10 temperatures, and they would walk into the cold water of the lake. I'm like, are you mad? Are you crazy? That's nuts. Like, I just couldn't get out. But anyway, are you? I mean, are you that type of person? By the way, I'm assuming you're not that type of person. Go skinny dipping into.
Yeah, I do sort of swimwear, but yes, I would be happily going to a lake that's whatever below freezing. I know my ice pod early in the year got to -1. I was breaking the ice off it, and I go in the sea every week, which is at the moment about 7-8 degrees. But it's a brilliant way to start the day. It's a good habit. I say there is some scientific stuff around all the sort of circulation, the physiological, but for me, it's the sort of mental toughness it does create, because it means you start the day that you've overcome something pretty harsh. It is harsh, obviously, and it means it sets you up really well that actually I can overcome that. I can do a lot of other stuff throughout the day. So it creates that sense of achievement, but also helps you de-stress as well, reduces your stress when you get into situations where you're feeling a little bit like you don't panic as much because you're a lot more controlled, because you know you can control your breathing, you know you can control stress response because you've just done it this morning. So fantastic. I always recommend it.
So you're probably one of the crazy people that go out and go out for a swim in the ocean on Boxing Day, right? Have you seen those people?
Well, yeah. Well, this all started last as in New Year 2022, and with some friends, and then it just snowballed into doing it every week. And I say doing it with other people is like a social thing. And in fact, I put a post out a few weeks ago that I did this with some friends, and then in my local sort of networking, they said, "Oh, we'll be up for that." And so actually this week we did it. We all came together in my garden, bacon sarnies afterwards, and it almost created a networking event whilst stripping off, going in some cold water, and it was a great thing to do. Brilliant.
I love that kind of like creativity juices. That's kind of cool. That's definitely a new way of doing some business networking. 100% love that.
Yes.
Anyway, looking forward to this conversation. So talking about resilience and stuff, and I would kind of like jump in here because, coming from from a discipline of, elite athletes and elite running myself, I talk a little bit about mental toughness. Is there a kind of like, is resilience and mental toughness, are they different in your eyes from your perspective? And what are the subtle differences? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, that's interesting thing to point out. I think there's a nuance slightly. I think for me, for resilience is it's not just about the grit determination. It's about the ability to learn as well. Because I think often we can get caught up about, it's just plowing through, but actually no. Sometimes things you've got to stop, reflect, and what knocked you down. How did you get knocked down? What was causing that? And the resilience piece is the learning piece, it's the creativity, it's the innovation piece. I think mental toughness is that bit at points when you are struggling and finding things really difficult. Now some would say this is like a trait, as in you are born as the way you are, and possibly might be something to do with that. But I recently coached an athlete who has just ran 7 marathons in 7 days on 7 continents. And she came to me to help her with the mental toughness, the mental resilience piece, and not to do with the physical side. And you know, we did various stuff coaching for sort of 3 or 4 months, and brilliantly she completed it. I'm actually I'm catching up with her on Friday actually, just to hear the stories and what was all going on behind it. But it's interesting. I shared a real mental hack tip which I got from a guy called David Goggins. He's a sort of a big sort of endurance, you probably know about endurance athlete, and he talks about the cookie jar. And this is, to me, I think, is sometimes where the mental toughness sometimes comes in. And he talks about how you have all those stories and achievements you've done in your life, you know, whether it's whatever, you've done an Ironman, you've done this, done all various things. And when you get to that point when you are really struggling, instead of just trying to fathom and trying to push through, actually just take a moment and take a deep breath and almost put your hand into the cookie jar of what you've done before. Remind yourself of that. And that starts to help you overcome and start to think, actually, I can overcome this situation because I've done this, I've done that. And that, to me, is almost probably helping you with the mental toughness at that point in inflection when you're facing with something really quite challenging.
I was also thinking, there's a couple of good points you made there. And I'm thinking, from a mental toughness perspective, I mean, you do a lot of stuff with teams, for example. And I can understand maybe mental toughness is more applicable to individuals rather than teams. Do you know what I mean?
I guess so, but in some ways, you making a sort of shared mental models in a team that can help you tough mentally as a team. So it can translate in that way as well. So in that context, does work.
Yeah, love that. Some good stuff. All right. Well, listen. Now, interestingly enough, because I love the fact that you work with your client there with regards to seven marathons on 7 continents. I've, you know, a few
in
people
7
have
days.
done that in 7 days. That's insane. That is crazy. Does that include Antarctica, by the way?
It started Antarctica, went up to Cape Town, went to Perth, went to Dubai, went to Madrid, went to Brazil, I can't remember exactly where, and then to Miami in the US.
Wow, that's insane. That is crazy. Anyway, love that. Let's talk a little bit about when a team breaks down in terms of cracks. So, you know, it doesn't matter small or big team, right? If we look at the cracks of a team and why a team breaks down, and because they maybe they lack resilience, and that's maybe the cause of the occurrence of the cracks, for example. What are some of the things that a lot of like business leaders need to look for in terms of those cracks? What are some of the warning signs that we need to look for in terms of a team, you know, breaking down, if you like?
Yeah, there's a number of things to look out for. I talk a lot about psychological safety being a real building block of creating a resilient team. And when you see people becoming really quiet, not sharing, not taking any risks, not challenging, then you can start to sense that you haven't got a psychological safe team, because there are all the things that happens if you have. I think another thing to look out for is this people working almost in silos, not this sort of collaborative approach, because I think collaboration is quite key in teams and supporting each other, getting around people as well. So you start to see people doing things on their own, in their own way, and also not aligned to what the overall purpose or the mission of that team might be. So they seem to be just going off. And so you spot that, to me, is just spotting those cracks and thinking there's something not quite right here, doesn't feel right. And then just that lack of innovation, lack of when a challenge comes in, when something happens, whether it's a massive thing like a pandemic or a small thing like potentially, say, losing a client or a sort of project fails, is the lack of creativity and everybody being completely sort of flat, low morale, and just not knowing what to do next. But those sort of, I would say, the telling signs of you haven't got a very resilient team at that point in time.
No, that's some good points there. And I suppose also things like communication breakdown and conflict also occurs as well, doesn't it?
Oh, totally. And I think it's, you know, I mean, communication is an absolute key thing in terms of making teams work really well. But it's how you communicate, and what you're communicating is really important, and making sure that's aligned to what you're trying to do as a team or as a business. So it's not just the sort of the comms, because I think people get caught up. I've just got to communicate. Well, yeah, you have, but it's how you do it, why you do it, and in the way you do it, and how that creates that engagement. And communication also is it's a two-way thing, isn't it? It's like you and I are talking here. The two-way process. It's not a one way. And I think leaders get caught up with, well, I'm telling people, well, are you listening as well? Because that's communication as well, is making sure we're receiving stuff and understanding what is going on.
Mm-hmm. Yep, good point. Love that. Now I know it's easy for I know businesses, small or big, to get stuck into a negative spiral as such. How do teams, small and big businesses, if they get sucked into that kind of negative cycle or that spiral, if you like, how do you get out of that? Because it can be very difficult to, especially if you're stuck in, as I call it, like Alice falling down the rabbit hole and kind of being able to claw yourself back out. It's kind of another suppose metaphor and stuff.
Yeah, it can be really difficult, and unfortunately, we are, as people, negatively biased. We're more likely to be more negative than positive, which sounds a bit difficult. True. I think it's our evolutionary protective defense mechanism. We're more negative about things, and so once it does spiral, unfortunately, it does almost like it's quite contagious to try and stop it. So I remember, we're talking 3 years now, when the pandemic all kicked off. And I remember having conversation with CEOs at the time who were in a state of shock, a state of what on earth's going on, what can I do? And, potentially that was creating a lot of negativity, not just within the team, but within the sort of leadership. And I remember one CEO in particular, and he had quite a purpose-led sort of business and how he approached things. And I just said to him, well, is your purpose of your business, does it remain the same in the context of what you're facing as reality now, the pandemic? And he went, yeah, pretty much it does. It doesn't change really. I said, well, the only thing that's changed is the strategy, is in terms of the how, but also the timing of things. That's the only thing that has changed. And I encouraged him to say, go back to your team and then put that mission statement, purpose statement, how you sort of put that out, and remind people of that. Talk to people about it, and it will create an energy source. It will create a sense of innovation, and get people to say, look, this still remains the same, and this will be what we're shooting for. But what's in the way now is this thing called the pandemic, and it's causing all sorts of trouble. How can we navigate what's in front of us using that purpose as almost our North Star, whatever you want to call it? And he did that. He went away and did that with his team, and he came back to me and I said, how do you get on? He said, well, actually, it was brilliant, because just sharing the purpose again energized people, lifted people's gaze a little bit from not to dream and just to wander off and not get out of reality, but just to go look a little bit ahead, a little bit to the future of what could be. And it started to create some new ways of working, new ideas of how they could sort of meet their clients. And that started to create, and it was something like that. And he used it in a way that created that collaboration and say lifting people's gaze. And I would encourage a lot more of that, of trying to get people out of it in terms of that negative. And that's what he did. He got them out of the negative potential spiral they were going to go down into a more positive way. And that business is continued to sort of build and thrive and do really well.
It's interesting. I call it the core foundations, because going back to purpose, going back to what you stand for and why you do what you do type thing, I call it the core foundations. And I feel like it's such an overlooked, undervalued topic, if you like. Do you know what I mean? Like when you have those conversations and stuff like that. And it's great to hear that he kind of like got people on his side, because so many people fail to do that. Do you know what I mean? Like, and that's why you saw so many businesses fail, because it was like, how do you control the panic, if you like? But I love that. That's some good stuff.
But the key thing with purpose though is you've got to create a purpose that is beyond just making sales and profit. That's not a purpose. That's just
that's a goal.
We want to make more money. And yes, you need sustainability key, but it's bigger than that. It's bigger than you. It's contributing to the world, to communities, whatever it may be. And it's going to be something meaningful. And it's going to be something that you've got to live and breathe, and not just put onto your, painted on the walls and that's our purpose statement or whatever it is. Actually, it's got to be led by the leadership. They've actually got to role model it. They've got to act it out. They've got to sort of do it and feel it, and it's got to be continually sort of communicated and shared, and and making sure that, I was talking to somebody the other day that whenever they get new clients come in, they always go, does this align to our purpose? Which is interesting. Does this get us closer to our purpose? And if it does, let's go ahead. If it doesn't, we're not going to work with that client. And it's a really good way of continuing to talk about the purpose. And so when things do happen, like the pandemic or anything really, you can go back to our purpose. How do we get back to this purpose? How do we get on track? This is our North Star. This is our guiding light. We've just gone off a bit off a track here. How do we get back onto it? And how do we navigate these challenges that are ahead of us? So it's an ongoing process within an organization.
Love that. There's something that I picked up from what you were saying there, which was about role models. And, I guess, small team, big team doesn't really matter. But I guess having those role models and those leaders that can kind of steer the ship from choppy waters, if you like, if you want to call it that. But when it comes to role models, for example, when clients come to you in need of, being able to solve their problem or their challenge or whatever it is, how do you get the most out of role models, or how to develop role models so that they can be the best versions of themselves, so that it helps their teams to then kind of like move forwards? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And role modeling, we're role modeling right now. And I think people forget that the moment you are in front of somebody, you walk into a room, have a conversation with somebody on Zoom, on a phone call, you are role modeling. And whether you're role modeling positively, negatively, you're doing something and making an impact. And I think, when I tell leaders that the moment you walk into a room, you are making some impact, and you want to be intentional and be aware that you want to make the right impact in that context. And so, it's the most important way that you will create change and create behavioral change in people around you is role modeling. It's far more powerful than you just sharing some eloquent words, sharing some wonderful graphics on a presentation, or some nice movies that you've had shot for your presentation. They're all valid and good way to communicate. I'm not saying you don't do that, but the most powerful way is you role modeling. There was a study done many years ago by a guy called Bandura, and he talked about it's called the Bandura effect. It's all about role modeling and how people get impacted by what they see cognitively, almost subconsciously. And I'll just share very quickly that the study, it was done with children. They wouldn't do the study nowadays. It was back in the 60s. They do study with children, but the nature of the study I'll show. So they had children in one room, just sitting, playing as they would. I can't remember their age. They were quite young, I think primary school. And there was a Bobo doll, which was basically one of those blow-up sort of dolls that you hit over and it bounces back up again. So it's called a Bobo doll. And an adult went into the room and sat there. And then after a while, he would then punch the Bobo doll and a number of times, be basically quite aggressive to it. And then the other control room, they had the same scenario going with children. And an adult walked in, but the adult didn't do anything to the Bobo doll. And then I think a few hours later, the kids were then left on their own. And the room where the doll had been punched by the adult, the kids all started punching this Bobo doll and doing stuff to it and hitting it and everything else. And the ones where they didn't even touch it. And I think it shows you there was no verbal, no communication, no talking, nothing. It was role modeling, and that's how powerful it is. People see what you do and act. And if you're saying something to somebody and you are not acting on that as well, as in you're saying go this way and you're going a completely different way, then people subconsciously pick up this cognitive dissonance and doesn't sit right. And we've all had those scenarios with people. So be true to yourself, but be mindful that the moment you are in front of somebody, you're role modeling, and think about that. And I work a lot with clients in terms of helping them reflect back on them, almost become a mirror to them, and helping them understand the impact by taking them through some scenarios that they share with me, and how they thought they were impacting them on that scenario, and getting real self-awareness. And so I help them dial that up and become more intentional, not in a manipulative way, just in being true of who yourself and how you can make a better impact, and make sure that those values of who you are really exposed and amplified in the right way to sort of have the maximum impact in your business.
It's interesting. There's one thing that sort of came to my mind as well when it comes to, if you're going through a tough time, if your business is going through a tough time, going through the mill a little bit, one thing that came to my mind was the importance of attitude, because I feel like attitude is one of those things which is not really spoken about. But what's your take on attitude? Do you feel like, people that are part of that team, they've got to have that, everyone's got to be singing off the same hymn note type of thing? But if you've got someone who has a bad attitude generally, right, or they like see negativity, and there's this kind of mindset of, oh, that's just how the things are done around here type of, negative, closed-minded type of personality. How do you deal with those individuals? There are going to be toxic people out there. How do we kind of remove them from the equation and say, you know what, actually, if you don't get rid of this poison apple, you're not going to become very resilient. It's going to come crumbling down. It's going to be like an infection or a virus to your team, and it's not going to happen. So have you ever had those conversations?
Yeah, I think, as the attitude, they always say, employ people over attitude versus skill. You can always teach a skill as long as you've got the attitude. And I think it's really important to have that attitude. And you will always get, in a team, whether it's what you call toxic or just not so not so great, bad attitude. And I think the first thing for a leader is to do is ensure that you're I suppose communicating something quite inspiring as well, that will motivate people, inspire people as well. So always think about what are you doing and how you're going about things. I think dealing with people who've got bad attitude is to take them aside, really. I think it's to have a conversation with people. I would never do anything publicly. I don't think it's necessary. I think it's and ask them a question of, what are their thoughts on things? Why are they thinking what they're thinking? What do they think their attitude's like? Have they thought about it? Have they thought about their impact on other people? And depending on what they're staying as a business and what their skill set is and how important they are, just start to question them and ask them questions that makes them think a bit more about who they are, what they are, why they're doing things. And that can start to unpick stuff, because there might be just something something's just bothered them. And it might be nothing to do with what you're saying, nothing to do with the attitude. It could be something about something in their home life. It could be something that they're struggling at work. And actually, they're just using it as a defense mechanism to try and deflect away from them. And so just be mindful of that. And if it persists, I think you've got to, put some, like anything, put some boundaries in place. If they continue to be like they are, then this will start to happen and create a process, because you are impacting the business, you're impacting the team. And therefore, and obviously I'm not a HR expert, but take it down the HR route where you have to ultimately, you may have to exit that person. And I think it's just being mindful of that, that actually you've got to put some boundaries in place and just don't let it slip and think, oh, it will get better. Well, no, it won't get better until you deal with something. And if you deal with it and it works, brilliant. And you deal with it doesn't work, then you need to think about the other course of action and be quite decisive in how you go about that as well.
Yeah, it's a good point. I love that. Some good stuff. Some good points. That's some good golden bombs, golden nuggets. Guys that are listening in, by the way, if you are listening to us live, use the hashtag live, use the hashtag replay and ELC. And if you're listening to us on the podcast, also we'll make sure that Julian will put all the description notes below, and we'll also put Julian's social media links if you want to connect with him and ask these specific questions that we haven't covered in today's show. So, interestingly enough, and I mean, you've been working in this area of resilience for quite a number of years. I mean, you've got extensive experience working with big organizations as well as small ones. What are some of the insights that have you gained over the years in conversations with what I called failed stories, or stories that have been like, well, okay, this didn't work for us, and it didn't work for us because of this or whatever it is. Have you kind of gained any new insights over the last sort of few years from all your conversations that you've had?
Yeah, I suppose I don't look at it as failed stories. I think it's for feedback, really. And I think as much as I work with people, it's for them to take on board. I'm not there all the time. I'm there for a point. I'm a facilitator. I'm a coach. and I'll create insights and help. But ultimately, the leader and the team have to take that on board clearly. I work with I think a team of ladies who were looking to row around Great Britain, and this to me is a great story of what resilience is really about, because often we talk about resilience of when, like the client I just had, 7 marathons, 7 days, 7 continents, did it and achieved it, and that's a great story, and that's good, and obviously we all want success, but actually sometimes things don't always work out and pan out, but we don't hear that story because that's not nice to hear, is it? So I worked with this team for 12 months. They were going to row around Great Britain, leaving Tower Bridge, London, and taking a right out to sea, and doing 2,000 miles unsupported, unaided, all the way around, going through tides and shipping channels and weather and all sorts of things. I spent a year working with them on teamwork and communication, mental resilience, a whole host of stuff, resilient processes, the lots, visualization. And they were an absolutely great team, and went from a sort of a bit of a ramshackle of a team to then, I would say, high performance in terms of when they got on that boat, when they left off. Doing so well, they got off to the coast. They did 500 miles in, got off the coast of Wales, and they were heading for an anchorage because a big storm was coming in about 24 hours, 36 hours. And they were heading for an anchorage off the southeast of Ireland. Unfortunately, as weather is not a precise science, the storm came in sooner rather than later, which meant it got them. And this storm was pretty horrific. And they got into a situation where they just couldn't. They put a thing called power anchor, which helps stabilizes you, and they just couldn't get anywhere, couldn't move anywhere, and they had some damage to the boats, and they were basically in a position of things were at risk of life, effectively, and had to call out the lifeboats. Lifeboat came out and rescued them, and the lifeboat took them back to Wales, rescued them. And lifeboat actually said this was the worst storm we've had since 1972. Wow. So they were and there was 2 other boats in this sort of event as well, and they also got rescued as well. They were different parts of the sort of rowing, and they got rescued as well. And now you could say, well, they failed; they weren't very resilient. But actually, when they got back to Wales, they wanted to get back out again, which is incredible. It's madness, I think. But they couldn't get out because they're damaged from the boat and everything else. But also what it taught them is that, life is not just about getting outcomes. And in fact, we are not in control of the outcome. All we're in control of ourselves and the process. And it built to them, I suppose, they've gone off in their separate lives in terms of what they're doing, but they would have learned huge from that. Yes, they didn't succeed and they sort of failed, you could say, in that sense. But what they also did, they were part of a project that was collecting data. And this is where purpose comes in really well. So they were part of this collecting data for some climate change for the University of Portsmouth. And so there was an overarching purpose. And so they'd collected over 500 miles worth of data and stuff. And so actually they were achieving something. They achieved the purpose as well. And so that's taking things a little bit bigger rather than just the outcome of achieving the actual events. But yes, they learned loads. It wasn't a success in the themes of the world, but I would say they were successful in what they did. And they've got a load of skills, a load of abilities that will take them into their daily lives as well. And so, yes, and it's what they would have learned. And if they did that event again, and this is the key with resilience, is that, okay, if you do that event again, what could you learn from that? In terms of difficult to judge with storms like that, but there's some awesome learnings that would have come from that.
I love that. That's a really good point. I think that there's one thing that I picked up from that really was resilience shouldn't always be about the outcome, and I think that's a really good perspective. I love that because it's not about the outcome, but it's also about the journey. You were highlighting the rowing team and stuff, which I think is a really good perspective. Interestingly enough, because one of the things that kind of what I feel was kind of important is vulnerability. When you work with clients specifically, and you talk, and and a client is going through challenges or whatever it might be, they want to become more resilient. They want to develop a more of a resilient team or whatever it is. What are some of the questions that you ask certain team members in terms of vulnerability? How do you expose people to vulnerability, and how do you play to their strengths?
Okay, yeah. Vulnerability is an interesting one, isn't it? I think I think on the resilience piece, I think, and just to sort of finish off before, in terms of that whole, it can become a bit of a toxic thing as well, where people think it's all about being resilient and tough and getting through things. And actually, there's a vulnerability piece where actually it's okay to ask people for help. It's okay that things are not working out as well as I'd expect. And in terms of, creating that, and I think vulnerability is an important factor, because things go wrong, things don't happen, and I think this perception, you need to be more resilient to keep going. Well, actually, it's okay to stop something and not do it, and it's okay to ask people for some help and have some support and everything else. And I think that's the vulnerability piece, I think, is where it plays into. And I often use that in the context of the psychological safety as well, which is where true psychological safety is where vulnerability is rewarded. You're rewarded for being vulnerable, to say, look, I am struggling, I need some help, but also vulnerability in the sense of, if you're taking a risk on something and it's something quite new and you're putting yourself out there and sort of putting your head above the parapet, so to speak, there's vulnerability with that as well. Stepping into the arena with, like, I'm not too sure this is going to work or not, but I'm going to give it a go. That's vulnerable. Challenging your boss on a way of working which you don't think is going to really help, but respectfully challenging, not doing it in a way that's horrible. That's vulnerability as well. That's that. So I tend to do a lot of work on the psychological safety, is developing that, asking people and saying, it's almost a question to the team. What happens when things go wrong? And I try and elicit that. What happens when your boss says something you don't agree with? What happens? And start to create that conversation that makes people think, oh, we don't normally challenge things, people, or I'm not so sure about that, and try and create that honesty and see what the team will say and do when I ask those questions.
Yeah, it's a good point. I like that. Some really good stuff. That there was something else that came off the top of my mind, and it comes to whether it be working with individuals or you're working with small teams or whatever it is. I was actually thinking about the psychological and emotional, I suppose kind of like benefits, but also kind of there's also kind of a placebo to that. There's kind of like the vice versa to that. How is it that we feel? How should we feel emotionally when we're going through times of resilience as individuals? But also, is there a right or is there a wrong? Is there kind of like a, I don't know, like a playbook or a book of resilience saying, oh, your team members should feel like this, and this is the reason why. What's your take on that?
I don't think there is a playbook as such. We're all different, and going through any journey of good things, bad things, we'll all respond differently. I think the thing to watch out for is often when you are facing challenges and difficulties, people go into there's the whole sort of change curve sort of reaction to things, which it's good to think about. I mean, I talk that a lot with leaders about how to sort of monitor how people are reacting, whether it's to change that you've instigated or change that's been forced upon you, and just to sort of watch out for where people, get that initial shock of something. Oh, there's a pandemic type of thing, and just watching out for people's reaction and being cognitive of that, the emotional state of people as well. And then people go into, I think it's denial, isn't it? It's almost like bury their heads and think, it's not going to happen. Nothing's going to harm us. And I don't want to know, almost like, don't tell me this. And then people go into that stage where they get really frustrated, become quite verbal and quite aggressive and quite angry and emotionally. And again, it's good to allow that to happen, allow people to sort of vent and go, I'm really struggling with this, find it really difficult as well. And then there's this potential sort of depression stage. It's not depression as such, but people go a bit quiet. And again, just watching out for that quiet things. In fact, actually, they're moving through that process. and then they start to embrace and engage in this new way of working, this new thinking, this new type of thing we're doing, or this new change has been put upon me. So that's one thing I would talk about. But people, like anything, it's just being close to people, having conversation, developing those relationships with people, and allowing people to, share and open up, and really, trying to get people where they are today. We often say to people, "How are you?" Most people just very quickly go, "I'm all right. I'm okay today." And I remember somebody telling me, a HR lady used to always say, "How are you today?" and put a point in time. And I've used it quite a few times in my career. And I'd go to somebody and say, "How are you today?" And it makes people stop and they go, "Well, actually, I'm not feeling great today. I'm feeling a little bit like this today." And so I think it's important to get really an understanding of where people really are at, and emotionally and sort of psychologically from that question.
Yep, love that. Now, I know that we're coming towards kind of the end of our conversation, but there's one other question that kind of is nagging at me here. And I suppose if we want to become more resilient, individuals or teams, whichever it might be, but we've made the decision that we want to become a more resilient business as such. How do we become more resilient when you've got so many different personalities that you're having to deal with in a certain team? Because there's a lot of bells and whistles, there's a lot of things that you've got to take into consideration. But how do we kind of like develop that resilience, but also play, personalities and people's different personality? How can we make it more streamlined, if you like?
Yeah, and without telling you everything I do with the team, because there's a lot. There's one thing that really does help people, and people like processes. People like a good old process. And I talk a lot about building in sort of resilient processes. And there's three I put in place, or encourage organizations to put in place, and it's reduce, regulate, and repair. So reduce is all about how can you reduce the likelihood of risk impact to your team, to your business? And this is what I would call, it's almost the what if scenarios, the drills. If you were the rowing team, they did man overboard drills. So somebody jumps in and they do the whole drill. And so when it happens, really, you just it's automatic and you do it. And so that's almost the what if scenario. So I'd encourage businesses to, and I did some work with the business last year, actually. We did a what if scenario on almost like a financial resilience. We went through, and this was back in May last year when things were getting a bit kicking off with energy prices and potential recession, all that sort of stuff. And so we spent a day just going through every possible scenario. It's not being negative, it's just being what could happen. Our prices from our suppliers could go up. We could lose some talent. We could lose some business, and they just panned it all out. And we started to then take those what ifs and financially look at it. And then, okay, if that happens, what would we do in that scenario? And so it starts to prepare everybody. So when it does happen, it's not such a big deal. So we sort of created the plan of this already, because we had this sort of conversation a few months ago that this would happen, and therefore it has happened, and then we're going to do this. So that's one thing. And then regulate is all about when you do hit a crisis or something quite difficult, bump in the road, is the whole thing about how you manage and sort of regulates your team. And again, put in place things like huddles. How are you going to sort of operate when things happen? How are you going to communicate? Who's going to communicate? How are you going to keep motivation high? And so just, again, it's already in place. And so when things happen, you're ready to go. And then the final thing is where a lot of businesses don't do this, is then when you are through something, it's almost the repair, the debrief piece. Take some time to reflect on what you got through, whether you're successful or not. Do some time as a team. What did we learn from that scenario that we can put in place for any what ifs and anything else we need to do going forward? How did the sort of communication go? Was it good, bad, ugly, whatever it is? And again, put that in place. So just putting those processes, and that will appeal to any personality type in that context, and really help ground people that there's a process to sort of hold on to. Making sure that the process serves you. It's not something you serve at the process.
Yep. Love that. Some good stuff, that. For you guys that are listening, I hope you've been enjoying our conversations, and hope that you've, if you haven't had the opportunity to listen to our live stream, of course, you can take a listen to mine and Julian's great episode interview here over on Apple or Spotify or whatever your favorite podcast platform is, of course. So thank you very much for that. Julian, just want to say thanks very much for joining us here and having a great conversation. Just want to say thanks very much.
Well, thank you, Adam. I've loved it. It's really, really good conversation. It's something I'm passionate about, love talking about, and could carry on talking about all day long. But yeah, no, thank you. Really appreciate that. Thank you.
Good stuff. And for you guys that are interested more to learn about Julian, you can check out his podcast, by the way, which is all about helping organizations thrive. You can check that out. And again, on all major podcasting platforms, of course, and take a listen to some of the interviews that he's done with a lot of thought leaders on there. So listen, guys, hope you've enjoyed today's episode. If you have great, fantastic, either 1 or a 5-star, obviously I love 5-star reviews, of course, over on Apple or Spotify. And yeah, listen, hope you've enjoyed today's episode. And if you have, please come and join us for another new show as well. And hopefully we'll see you soon. Anyway, from me and Julian, thanks very much. And we'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.